if we could ever really know ourselves really deeply, it would be awful.
Maybe we really are in a simulation.
30% of young males have an AI girlfriend. This is the heart of change blindness. This is why we don't notice when there are massive changes. Here would be the optimal social media algorithm that I think could actually change the world. This is going to lead to the collapse of the population.
Tell me about this pain matrix in-group versus out-group empathy thing. This was kind of a little alarming.
Yeah.
Almost.
Yeah. So this is something I've been very interested in for a very long time, is about how as a species we're so cooperative. You know, the reason we've built our whole civilization as well as we have is because we're so good at linking arms and making stuff happen. But we evolved in small groups, humans did. And so we are very prone to saying, this is my in-group, and those people over there, they're my out-group.
Yeah.
And it turns out there's been lots of studies like that from my lab and many other labs showing that we just have less empathy for people in our out-groups. We just don't care about them as much as in if they get hurt or something. So here's a study that I ran in the lab some years ago. We put you in the brain scanner, functional magnetic resonance imaging, fMRI, and you see 6 hands on the screen, 6 hands that all pretty much look alike. And the computer goes around and picks one of the hands. And then you see that hand either get touched with a Q-tip or stabbed with a syringe needle.
Yeah.
And yeah, exactly. Watching it with getting stabbed with a syringe needle, everybody...
Is it real? Someone actually
the way we filmed it is we made a syringe needle that contracts. So as you're pushing, the needle's actually going back up.
I'm like, who's volunteering for that? Like, all right, I really need these $30. Go for it.
Yeah, but it looks quite horrifying. And so what we do then is, the way we analyze that kind of data is we compare the two cases. And what you see is that in the case where the hand is getting stabbed, you have all this area come online, this network of areas, I should say, that we summarize as the pain matrix. And that's what happens if you get hurt. Like if your hand gets stabbed, this same area comes online, which is to say, when you are watching someone else get stabbed, this is the neural basis of empathy. You are empathizing with their pain, even though you're not in pain. And this is great. This is what humans do, is they see the pain of someone else and they empathize. What would that feel like? Yeah. So that's very important. But what we then did is we had the same 6 hands and we labeled each one with a one-word label: Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, Scientologist, atheist. And now the computer goes around, picks a hand. You see that hand get stabbed. And the question is, if it's a member of one of your out groups versus your in group, does your brain care as much? And the answer is it does not. Your brain does not care as much if it's a member of any of your out groups that gets stabbed. And by the way, we tested this on all religions, including, by the way, atheists. Even atheists have this, which is when an atheist hand gets stabbed, they have a bigger empathic reaction than when any of the non-atheist hands get stabbed. So this is really, the first lowest level signature of empathy that we have. And all it takes is a one-word label for people to feel like, oh, I don't really care so much about that hand.
I feel like we're seeing a little bit of this now in discussions, at least online, about the LA fires, right? So a lot of my friends were in the Pacific Palisades. They lost their homes. Other people are like, my house is heavily damaged, but still there. And I feel really bad for them because they're my friends and they lost their homes and their kids don't have any toys anymore or anything. And they're, imagine young kids and they lost all their clothes, all their toys. I mean, it sucks. It sucks for the adults, but they can kind of wrap their heads around it. They're trying to comfort their children. It's a terrible, terrible situation. But online, people are like, who cares? A bunch of rich people lost their house. Or they're like, good. Now they know what it feels like when nobody wants to help us when we have problems. And I'm just like, I don't really get, these people just ran a fundraiser for, I don't know, whatever, the hurricane victims or something like that. And you're glad because you lost your house in the hurricane and you think that these people don't care about you. Therefore, you're glad their house is gone. I just see tons and tons of that. Now, granted, people are not their best selves on the internet. So I'm, just kind of take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. Some of them are probably 15-year-old kids who don't know what they're talking about or are just pushing buttons. But I see it and I hear about it from other people too. In fact, a text from another friend of mine who I was really disappointed in. I said, oh, did you hear that so-and-so lost his house? And he goes, well, the place wasn't that great anyway. And I'm like, it was on the shore of the Palisades. Like, it was pretty nice place. And I'm sure he's pretty upset about it. Maybe show a little empathy for him.
Strange.
But it's just
we saw this
envious.
happen when the CEO of United Healthcare was murdered in the street.
That's a better example.
Yeah.
People were like, well, that's what you get for, and I'm like, well, okay, I totally understand why people felt that way, but also he did have kids. You know, if you can't feel bad for him, at least feel bad for his kids.
I don't totally understand why people felt that way.
Oh, really?
Obviously, people had bad experiences with the insurance company,
Sure.
United Healthcare or others, but it's not that guy, Brian, making the decision
Right,
and
no.
putting the red stamp on their piece of
course.
paper.
I'm not saying I can relate
Yeah.
to it. I can wrap my head around why they're upset if their mother died because she couldn't get chemo from an insurance company. You might pin that on that one guy. It's not fair to do that, but I can rationalize how other people have done that. With fires, it's like those people don't know you exist, and you didn't know they existed until they told you their house burnt down, and your first reaction is good.
Right. I mean, okay, so this thing with LA, it's interesting because LA is so multicultural and
Yeah.
there's the people, but you can imagine if an equivalent fire happened in, we could name different countries,
Sure.
the reaction that some people would have, which is, oh, good, I'm glad that happened to those Russians or the whatever.
I guess it's just it's tough though. I don't think I would do that, but
Agreed.
I don't know. Maybe.
But okay, here's the thing. You would, I don't know what country or what religion or what thing it would be for you, but here's the interesting part. We don't know for sure that all the people, we measured 128 people in the scanner. We don't know that all of them actually act badly to their, neighbors and so on. Why? Because what we are measuring is the first brain response, which is, hey, I really care about these people in my in-group. I don't care so much about these people. But you might have other cognitive layers that say, you know what, that embarrasses me that I don't care as much about, the Russians who were just in the fire. So I'm going to donate to that Russian charity because so there's lots of...
That makes me feel a little better because you're right. There's probably something where, I don't know, if something happened in, I can't even think of a country that I don't like, and I'm hesitant to name one. But you're right. My gut reaction might be like, well, that's what you get for, I'm a terrible person for thinking that. This is innocent women and children. What am I doing? I would think less of myself for a minute after that. But you're right. I wouldn't probably go right about how they deserved it on the internet.
Right. And people have done these tests for years called the implicit association task. And by implicit, they mean something that you can't even articulate. It's not explicit. And what they find is that, everybody has biases against certain things, certain groups, certain, sexual orientation, certain whatever it is. Everyone's got something going on deep down, but it doesn't mean anything about their behavior.
When all those Hezbollah pagers blew up, I was not super upset for a long time. I was like, but then you hear that it blew up in their daughter's face and then you're like, oh, that's terrible. But yeah, I wasn't like, oh, those poor Hezbollah terrorism support or Hamas or whatever. Yeah. I don't feel a ton of sympathy for the actual people who were guilty of terror to get blown up. But yeah, there was a lot of collateral damage. And then you feel bad because you're like, well, that guy could have just been a doctor who was associated with Hezbollah. That sort of sucks.
Well, he wouldn't have had a pager. But here's the thing. So I felt the same way you did. But rewind history where you and I are born in Lebanon and for some reason our parents are Hezbollah.
I would 100% have joined an organization like that. Yeah.
Well,
totally.
but what I was going to say, aside from joining an organization, the question is how would we feel empathic for that? Then heck yeah, we would, right? So it's just a matter of which in-group and out-group you belong to.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. And of course we care more about people in our group. I think there's something that I don't like admitting that about myself. And I can't be alone in that. I can't be alone in being like, oh, not me. Surely most of us think that way.
What's very interesting is we also did, in parallel with these neuroimaging studies, we also gave people these very full questionnaires where they fill them out. And there are these standardized tests for how empathic a person you are and so on. And what we found was something we really didn't expect, which was that the people who showed the biggest difference between their in-group and out-group neural responses were also the people that described themselves as the most empathic, which is very interesting. I think there are a few possible interpretations of that. One is that they somehow deep down know that they aren't seroempathic, and so they're lying on the questionnaire. That's one possibility. One possibility is that when they think about their empathy, they're thinking about their in-group.
Yeah, I was going to say they're mostly thinking about the group that they're in.
Yeah, like what if I saw my uncle fall and twist his ankle? Would I be empathic? I'd be the most empathic person in the world. And they're right in assessing that. They're just not thinking about how they would feel if it was their out-group. Anyway, but this all goes to your statement about, what things we admit to ourselves and do not. I have a strong suspicion that if we could ever really know ourselves really deeply, it would be awful. I don't think we'd want to know all of our weird flaws and the lies we make to cover up the kind of personality things. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't even do bad things, and I still feel like I'm constantly rationalizing behavior where I'm like, I really shouldn't let myself go on this, but I'm feeling awful about it. I'm just going to make up an excuse and then never do this again.
Yeah, exactly.
I do that all the time.
So by the way, yeah. Okay, so but I just yesterday was in Arizona doing a podcast with Jordan Peterson, and he and I got very deep on this topic. Because he and I are both, fans of the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, and we both know about this statement he made, which is that, let me back up one sentence, which is that what I wrote about in my book Incognito and years ago was this issue that really the way to think about the brain is that we are a team of rivals. You've got all these neural networks that all have different drives and they want different things, and you are a collection of these things. Okay. So for example, if I, put some chocolate chip cookies in front of you, part of your brain wants to eat that. Part of your brain says, don't eat it. I'm on a diet. Part of your brain says, okay, I'll eat it, but I'll promise my wife that I'll go to the gym tomorrow. Like whatever, you can contract with yourself, argue with yourself, cuss at yourself. This is the weird part about being human is we've got all these different drives. Okay, here's what Nietzsche said. He said, every drive philosophizes in its own spirit. What he meant by that was when you are gripped by rage or sexual desire or whatever, or desire to eat the chocolate chip cookies, you have this way to philosophize, to rationalize, to say, well, this guy really deserves this, or I'm going to make this lie over here to get what I want sexually, or I'm going to, here's all the reasons why I should eat the cookie. Mm-hmm. But the point is when you're in that moment, when you're being driven by these particular neural networks, you philosophize in that spirit. You say, oh, you know what? Actually, this makes total sense. I should do this. I should do exactly what I want. Your aim makes the pathway open up to you. You see, here's exactly what I should do so that I can eat these cookies.
There's a sort of similar term. It's not exactly the same thing. I'm trying to remember the name. I think it's called moral license, where it's like I drive a Prius so I can not recycle, I don't know, my cans. Have you heard about this?
Yeah.
And that's maybe a bad example, but it's like people will say, well, I drive an electric car so I can fly more because I'm not using carbon when I drive. Whatever it is. I don't even doing emissions when I drive. Something along those lines. And it seems like a stretch, and yet I think of course, people like you test for these things, and they find that, I don't know how you make that connection if somebody doesn't make it directly, but they've found that over and over. And I remember the Prius thing because there was something that people who drive electric cars / Priuses that they do, and they found that they were correlated. And either it's the hypothesis that it's moral licensing, or I really should have, I didn't prep this particular line of thought, as you can tell, but there's something here that's similar to what you're saying, I suppose.
Well, what it is that you want to, whatever it is, like not recycle the cans because you're feeling lazy, or you want to, let's take the simpler example. I want to eat the cookies. So when I'm gripped by that desire, I can cook up something.
Yeah, well, I walked this morning extra far because I took the dog out. So I can eat these 300 calories.
Exactly. Yeah. What I'm doing is I'm philosophizing in such a way that I can land at the conclusion that I want.
Yeah. I mean, we all do that for sure.
Yes.
It's just, it's uncomfortable to admit that we do that. And it's much more comfortable to admit we do that with a chocolate chip cookie than it is to be like, I'm only a little bit racist against this one group because, and then it's like, I don't want to write that down on any surveys.
Right, exactly.
That's a terrible thing to think about yourself.
Yeah.
So then you have to go the extra mile when you philosophize about it, because otherwise you're a racist, and that's a really uncomfortable thing to admit to yourself.
That's exactly right. But what's interesting, just to repeat this, what's interesting is the end conclusion of that is that you might actually do really wonderful things in the world. You might go out of your way to, go to some charity event and help. In fact, people have long noted that sometimes the people who are the loudest about, let's say, being anti-racist online, sometimes they're the people with the deepest internal demons that they're fighting. Yeah.
That's for sure true. I think whenever you watch these documentaries about the super racist folks, there was one documentary recently. I think she's a Muslim British gal. She did a documentary about going to all these very deep South, neo-Nazi things. And she was like, but you guys and I get along. And they're like, well, you're different, but the rest of your kind. And it was just so fascinating to watch them do these gymnastics around her because they liked her. She was nice to them and they were nice to her. And they were like, well, you're one of the good ones. And she's like, but I'm very average run-of-the-mill Muslim girl from the UK. And they're like, well, that's not true. And it was just, they refused to recognize that they were normal middle of the road secular-ish Muslims, and they had to do the dance they did around her. That was the fascinating part of the documentary. Right.
Yeah. Although what's interesting is that every group is on a really broad distribution. So that will always be available to people to say, I like you, but there's this, but I think that in your group, whatever group it is, there are people who do X, Y, Z, and I don't like that. So what's interesting is that chess move will always be available to those guys.
Yeah, that's true.
It actually wouldn't make sense for them to meet one young woman who they think is really great and then say, oh, I used to have these political opinions, but now I've changed my mind entirely because of an N of one.
Have you ever heard of Daryl Davis? He's this African-American dude, great jazz musician, and I won't say it's a hobby because that's kind of a weird way to phrase this, but he's been on the show. What he did, one day he played jazz at a club and there were these Ku Klux Klan guys there. And one guy was like, can I have a drink with you? And he's like, sure. And then the guy told him he was in the KKK and he's like, okay, what's about to happen? Because, if you haven't noticed, I'm black. And the guy was like, yeah, but you play like Jerry Lewis. And he's like, I did play with Jerry Lewis. And these guys kind of got acquainted. And over years of talking, this Klansman turned in his robe and is like, I just can't hate black people anymore. It doesn't make any sense because of my interactions with Daryl. So he got that robe. And then he's done this 50 times with 50 different Klansmen. He's sort of de-radicalized them by just becoming their friend and not being judgy.
Terrific.
And then he brings, it's weird because it's crazy, right? Because this guy will have a daughter who gets married and Daryl's there and half the wedding is Klansmen or former Klansmen or people who are the brothers in the Klan, and it's like, okay, so the best man is this black dude here, what's going on? He's a fascinating guy because of his level of empathy and his ability to take shit from people, I guess, is part of it. I mean, he's an incredible human.
I mean, here's the thing. So there's two things I would say there. One is that, interestingly, if you measured any of these Klansmen who had hung up their robe, you'd probably find this really low-level circuitry in their brain having a difference in their reaction to black and white.
Mm-hmm.
But this is an example of the guy layering on cognition and what we might call wisdom and saying, hey, you know what? Even though my very first reaction is this, I know that if I sit down at the bar with this guy and talk to him, he obviously had a desire to do that, to move, to see if he could discover something new, then he can do something wonderful. And by the way, obviously we all know, as kids we grow up, whatever neighborhood we're in, we're maybe exposed to, all these races and religions, but not these other ones. And so it's easy with our in-group, out-group proclivities to say, okay, that's an out-group. But then you go to college, you meet people of various things. This is the whole game, right? It's just meeting lots of people and seeing that, look, here's how I view it. Humans moved out of Africa about 250,000 years ago. Humans started radiating north out of Africa, and some turned left and became Europeans, some turned right and became Asians. And that period of time is so short from a biological point of view. Yeah. We're all exactly the same on the inside. We've all got brains and lungs and hearts and if you look from the point of view of a biologist, there's no difference between people. Obviously, cultural differences exist, religious differences exist. There's all kinds of like local cultural stuff, but people are the same. So the important part is to figure out, how do we find ways to reach across the aisles?
Yeah.
And so one of my big interests is, if I can get to the right ears, to the right place, to tweak the social media algorithms. So here's what I mean. Currently, as we all know, the social media algorithms favor, anger and
outrage,
people getting, it's incentivized to be incendiary, let's call it. And so, but here would be the optimal social media algorithm that I think could actually change the world, is imagine that you and I have totally different political beliefs, but we both like, hang gliding and this kind of dog, and we like, biking on Sundays and whatever. So every time one of us makes a post on that, we're both seeing that. I'm seeing you. I don't know you yet. You're a stranger to me, but I see that post and you see my post. Oh, hang gliding. Oh, this. We find all these things that we have in common. Then one day when we discover, we have different political opinions, then we're like, oh, cool, Jordan, tell me about that. I didn't know. Why do you feel that way? And so on. And then we can talk. But if the first thing you know about me is that I have a different political opinion, then it's a different ballgame. Then you relegate me to the outgroup.
That's interesting, right? So if we can figure out how to get the social media algorithm to make the in-group kind of everyone-ish, that would change society. But instead, the algorithm is everyone's in the out-group except for the people that have my particular beliefs on these particular issues.
Exactly right. And by the way, it doesn't have to be the in-group everybody. It's my in-group is other hang gliders and other people who like this kind of dog. Like, that's my only group, and that's fine. Because there's nothing about that that's going to make me pick up arms and go to war over that stuff.
Right, yeah. You're not going to, like, prevent those people from getting health care because they like Dachshunds instead.
Exactly
right. How you
right.
pronounce that, but yeah.
Exactly right. And so the idea is, and by the way, obviously these social media companies, from our behavior and things we post, they know tons of data on us. So that could really be used for good by saying, hey, look, these two strangers have something in common that they like, just whatever. We like Salvador Dali paintings or whatever it is. And then you emphasize that stuff.
Huh. Well, good luck with that mission. I hope you get to do that. The counterfeiting thing was interesting, but changing society via this way would be absolutely incredible. Okay, I'm going to shift gears here a little bit because I know I'm definitely going to run out of time. So can we ever upload our brains to the internet? Because my body, I work on it a lot. It's a losing battle. The hair turns gray no matter what. You get those weird dots on your skin or whatever, no matter what. It's harder to lose weight or keep it off. So I'm not going to say I gave up on the body, but I'm aging and that's that. But my brain, so far so good, man.
Yeah.
Maybe I should freeze a snapshot now and upload it if that's a thing. But can I ever upload my brain to? It doesn't have to be the internet, but can I ever upload a replica of what's in there into the digital sphere?
Great question. Yeah. So okay. The short answer is right now,
no.
We don't have the technology that would even get us close to that. Why? Because the brain is made up of 86 billion neurons, about that same number of glial cells, and the connections between the neurons is about 2 trillion neurons. So 200 trillion.
Wow.
Sorry, I said that all wrong. 200 trillion synapses, the connections between them. Okay, so what does that mean? It means we don't have, if you took all the computing power on the planet right now, it's not enough to actually...
On the whole planet?
On the whole planet. Yeah, because it's about a zettabyte of information is what it would take to actually scan and store your brain. And we have probably a quarter of that capacity right now. So we can't do that yet. But 100 years for sure we'll have the capacity. No problem there. Okay, but the question is, if we took your brain and we put it onto a different substrate, let's say on silicon, would it be you? In theory, yes. In theory, it would be, because if we're running the algorithm of Jordan, that is you. And I could probably replicate it out of different material. I could make it out of beer cans and tennis balls. And if it's running the right algorithm, I can say, hey, Jordan, how you feeling? You say, oh, I'm feeling good, whatever. This is what's known as the computational hypothesis of neuroscience, which is it's the algorithms that matter and not the details of how Mother Nature had to build it out of cells. Okay, fine.
But it's still a simulation of just my brain.
Right. So here's the key.
Is that me?
Yeah. Well, so here's the key. There's a few interesting points here. One is we have to actually capture the mechanisms of brain plasticity. In other words, your brain's ability to change and move. Your brain is reconfiguring itself all the time, every second in your life. This was my last book, Live Wired, is all about this brain plasticity stuff. Because if we simply replicate this snapshot, then you don't have any memory. Like what I mean is you don't remember anything new.
Oh, right.
In other words, if I took a static snapshot of your brain, then you say, oh, great, today is, whatever, January 20th of 2035, and you never get past that date.
I'm just in this room with you forever.
Right, exactly. So that's number one, is you got to get brain plasticity right. And then number two is there's this really interesting thing about whether it is you. So let's imagine we scan your brain and then we kill you. And 100 milliseconds later, we start the thing up.
Yeah.
Then it's like you've transferred it. The thing that starts in this computer world says, whoa, I was just sitting in the living room with David, and now I'm here in this computer world. Okay. And it feels like you've transferred. But the question is, the you sitting here right now, do you feel like you have transferred, or do you feel like you just died? Right, exactly. You just got killed.
Yeah, that
and then
sucks.
this other creature came up that happened to have all of your memories. But the question is it you? And it might not be. It might
I don't
not
know how I feel
you.
about that. Yeah,
right.
I'm not doing that bad where I need to be euthanized right now with my brain uploaded.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then you would only want to do it when you were about to maybe die, or you're living your last few days in a hospital bed with a morphine drip, and it's like, okay, hit the upload now and transfer me. I guess you'd have to kill the person right away, because otherwise there's two of you, one who's in a hospital bed with a morphine drip, and then one that's in the computer that's like, why are you keeping my body alive?
Yeah.
He's miserable.
Well, what's weird is that if I kill you 100 milliseconds after the upload, then that's murder.
Yeah, you're just murdering me.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas if I do it just 100 milliseconds before, then it's a transfer. Then you're...
Jeez, that's crazy. So immortality, not necessarily right around the corner. One thing that was fascinating that you mentioned in the podcast, I'm willing to all these episodes in the show notes, or at least to the podcast feed, but programmers could change time for the simulation that's in the digital sphere. So right now, time just goes however nature. I'm not really sure how time works in the brain. That's a whole podcast probably, but there's no physical body to maintain. So in theory, in the digital sphere, I could just spend the next billion years in one Earth year hanging out with all my friends in one big long party, consuming things that would normally make my body hurt. But, hey, there's no body to worry about now. I can just enjoy myself in the Matrix, I suppose.
Exactly right. I find this a really interesting. Look, here's the thing. If we do upload ourselves at some point in the distant future, let's say 1,000 years from now, there's a couple things that we have to really watch for. One is, who are the programmers? Who watches the watchmen? Like, you are completely at the mercy of whoever is running the simulation, right?
Yeah, and they're God, essentially.
They're God, exactly right. It's scary because, in fact, it's just some 21-year-old guy with a goatee, and so you got
who's like playing Warcraft at the same time on another stream.
Exactly. So that's a really weird thing. There's presumably going to be whole bodies of legislation around this and what the rules are around this. But yes, one of the things I mentioned is that let's imagine we realized, oh God, the universe is collapsing and the universe is only going to last 5 more minutes. The programmer could speed it up so that you live, 1,000 years in those last 5 minutes and you didn't know it. Yeah.
I guess this is probably one of the only ways we can actually do super wide space travel, though, too, right? Because you can't put a body on I don't know how far away things are, but in the cosmos, it's like thousands of light years or whatever it's going to take. Even if we figure out light speed travel, it's going to take centuries for these computers that we send to get there. And in theory, you could put a person's brain in a robot over there, but that's the only way to do it. Because otherwise, the whole freezing of the body thing, even that's not going to work over that time span.
I mean, it might work.
Maybe.
It certainly could freeze a body that long. We have not perfected cryogenics yet, but in theory, it's not so hard. And we know that it works in the sense that sometimes people will fall into through the ice on a lake, and they will try to get out and they can't get out and they drown and they die, right? And then their body is rescued and they're brought to the hospital, and there's this whole thing where you extract the blood and warm the blood in a machine, and you're passing it back into other, and people end up fine. Like they actually come back to life from being frozen.
I've never heard of that happening.
Oh yeah.
That's incredible.
Here's one to link in the show notes. I'll send you a Lancet article. It's a medical journal about a woman who was a young young doctor who this happened to on a skiing trip. And yeah, she's perfectly fine. She's practicing medicine now and so on. But she was dead. She was actually dead and frozen, and she was brought back.
Oh my
This
God.
happens not infrequently.
So in theory, she's a few minutes younger than her actual age.
That's
Not
right.
bad.
Not bad. So, anyway, everything about cryogenics should work in theory. The problem is simply that, how do you freeze things fast enough so that you don't get ice crystals? And if you get ice crystals, that tears the cell membranes and blah, blah. So there's some stuff to be worked out there. But yeah, I think freezing people and sending them on space travel is certainly a possibility.
Jeez, all of this makes me, every time I learn more about this, I'm like, maybe we really are in a simulation. I don't know. What do you think of that theory?
What's interesting about that theory is that, Descartes was at least one of the first people to talk about this thing. How do I know I'm not, a brain in a vat being stimulated by scientists so that I think I'm sitting in this sunny living room talking with Jordan and so on. And people have worked on better and better versions of this. And obviously in the modern computer era, this became, how do I know I'm not a computer simulation? Well, what's been so weird to watch just over the last decade really is how extraordinary things are becoming. For example, with generative AI, people are using this in VR now to create whole VR worlds instantly. Like, hey, I want a 15th century whatever with a castle, and this just gets created the same way you would create an image, right? But a whole 3D VR world.
Yeah.
And we're just in 2025 right now. I mean, just imagine where things are going to be in 2045 or something.
Yeah.
So the point is, it becomes more and more plausible to say, well, God, we know we can make extraordinary simulations. Why not? And all it requires is imagining that maybe, just imagine our civilization 1,000 years from now, they might be running these sims. And of course, this could be recursive all the way down.
Right. It sims all the way down. It seems like there'll be people in our generation when we're older and we're, not in our best form and maybe we can't walk, we'll just be living in one of those little simulations. Some of us will be like, I'm not doing that, right? But the younger generations, like they'll probably be almost looking forward to that. And then eventually there'll be a generation that you can't pry, like with our phones, you just can't pry them away from it because it's better than real life, I suppose.
You mean living in the metaverse as opposed to uploading their brains?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Living in the metaverse. Because look, say I'm 85 and I'm like, walking hurts and a lot of my friends have passed away. Well, if I put this thing on and sit on my couch, not only do I not have to walk, but all my friends are 25 again and we're hanging out. That's a pretty compelling offer.
Well, I'll tell you. So do you remember the website called Second Life?
Yeah, of course.
Right.
Yeah.
So Philip Rosedale, a friend, is he's the guy who started that.
Wow.
And for those who don't remember Second Life, it's just you get to be an avatar in this little computer world. And you walk around, you talk to other avatars, and you can talk to them. Okay. Well, first I met a couple that had met in Second Life, and they were married to one another, right? That's how they met each other. But it turns out that's not uncommon. Here's the thing. Technology has moved way on beyond Second Life, right? But there's still about 1 million people that use Second Life every day. And these people often, not always, but quite often are people who, for example, are in wheelchairs or have other physical ailments, and they can be in Second Life and be avatars and live this other kind of life, which is precisely what you're describing. It's exactly the kind of thing. So you and I will be hanging out in the metaverse where we don't have any dots on our skin or gray hairs, and we'll be sort of really great high-resolution 3D avatars instead of low-resolution Second Life avatars. But I think that's exactly where we're all.
Yeah, it seems compelling even now. And look, it's perfectly fine, but wouldn't it be great? And you hear about these people who've gone through like grief or trauma. Like I hate to bring these things up because they're so sad, but imagine your whole family gets wiped out in a car accident and you're the sole survivor. You can either sit around being depressed and dealing with that, or you could potentially go to one of your favorite family vacations with all of your kids again in this imaginary world. I don't know if that would make dealing with grief easier or harder because they're still there in that way, but maybe there's a way to use that in a therapeutic sense.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
That's right. You know what I was thinking about is, imagine you were in that situation. You could, people find themselves in these situations. Let's not even take something as awful, but just like a divorce or whatever.
Sure.
They're alone again. building up a new relationship and getting a new spouse, that's a giant undertaking, right? So I've been very interested in what is the near-term future of AI relationships. So as you may know, there are tons of websites where people get, let's say, an AI girlfriend. It's typically males getting an AI girlfriend. There are some women who get AI boyfriends. But in Japan, apparently, this is an enormous thing going on. Where the statistic I heard, I haven't verified this, but I heard that 30% of young males have an AI girlfriend. Now, I'm fascinated by this because presumably that's not going away. So there's two things that could happen. The general prediction that I see in the media is that this is going to lead to the collapse of the population and people don't get married and stuff like that. Why? Because an AI girlfriend is always going to be better than a real girlfriend in the sense that
they don't have needs.
Yeah, exactly. They don't get hangry. They don't get grumpy. They don't say mean things to you sometimes. So but I have a more optimistic view on it. I think that this kind of thing might, in the best circumstances, actually improve relationships because it's sort of a way to get practice and do all the dumb stuff and say something. And the AI girlfriend says, hey, that really hurt my feelings when you said that. And maybe your AI girlfriend leaves you or whatever. But the point is that
damn it, I can't even keep an AI girlfriend and they're still billing me.
But the point is you get practice. I mean, look, all of us as young men do stupid stuff and we learn and you get wiser in relationships. And I think if there's an AI girlfriend company that builds these things so that there is pushback and there are thresholds at which they say, I'm leaving, I'm not hanging out with you anymore.
Oh, man.
What great practice that would be.
That's actually not bad, right? You could make all of your teenager, young adult mistakes while maybe also having a real girlfriend who would be really pissed and jealous. But also then you would go, you could say like, what about this? What about that? You know what? That's not going to go over well with your real girlfriend.
Exactly.
So don't do that. And you're like, oh, thank God I was able to simulate this particular conversation.
Yes.
That would be interesting.
Because that's what we do all the time is we simulate conversation. I'm like,
right.
Oh, I'm going to say this and then she's going to say that, then I'm going to say that to her and so on. What a great opportunity to actually run through and say, oh God, I hadn't even thought of that. That's a good,
Yeah, smart.
That's really going to hurt her feelings if I say that and it's not worth it.
And it can simulate millions of different women's potential opinions, right? So you can say, like, I can just imagine my AI girlfriend saying, there's an 80% chance that she finds this argument totally uncompelling and does not believe you at all. So I would pick a different strategy. Interesting. Yeah. That's fascinating. What about reading someone's thoughts via fMRI? I mean, that seems like a good use of brain tech, but it also doesn't. Everyone's brain would have to kind of be the same organization, right? Like I don't know.
No, great. So I'm glad you asked this question. The idea of mind reading using, let's say, fMRI, which is our current hot technology, but in 10 years it'll be outdated and there'll be, XMRI or something better. But the point is, first of all, every brain is completely different. I mean, you and I have tons of stuff in common, but our brains are totally different. We grew up in different places. We had different childhood experiences. We had different parents, or whatever. And as a result, all the fine structure of our brain is different. So there are certain things that you would find appealing, like a certain math problem or something, and I might find something, and maybe you like flying an airplane. I like riding horses and whatever. Like there's just a million differences. Okay, so that's the first problem. But the second problem is a real thought, a real person is so rich and multi-layered and highly textured that I assert it's actually impossible to do mind reading, certainly in our lifetimes, maybe ever. So here's what I mean. Where this shows up in the media all the time is, scientists have shown that we can, measure, let's say, what's happening in visual cortex to the degree that you can actually understand what somebody is seeing. Even if you're not seeing what they're seeing, just by the activity in their visual cortex, you can understand what they're seeing. The way you do this is you put people in the scanner. You show them hours and hours and hours of videos and pictures and stuff like that. And for each image, you're looking at what am I seeing in the visual cortex? And so you end up with these very fine correlations.
So everyone has the same input, and then you're looking at that through that. But so then you would have to measure someone's input for their whole life then.
Okay, so wait. So let's stick with vision for just 1 second. So if I'm measuring your visual cortex, I show you hours and hours of images, I measure your visual cortex, and eventually I can make a pretty pretty good correlative map. Why? It's because your visual cortex is essentially like a warped television screen, your primary visual cortex. Okay, so the media looks at these things and says, wow, that's mind reading. I can show you an image. Let's say, I don't know what the image is, but I look at your visual cortex and I say, oh, Jordan's just seeing an image of an elephant riding a unicycle. That's pretty amazing, right? But it's not mind reading. That's just reading your visual cortex. Same with auditory cortex. You can actually nowadays figure out what somebody is hearing in their ears from the activity on their auditory cortex. Very cool, impressive stuff. But that's not mind reading. The auditory cortex is just laying out the different frequencies. Okay. Think about what a thought actually is for you. Like the thought is, when you walked in my house, you're thinking, okay, let's see, I'm carrying this thing in my left hand. Oh, I've got to step over here because there's a rock in the way. I'm just moving over here. And oh, I've never been to David's house before, even though David and I have known each other for a long time. And oh, look, what's that? Oh, there's a grill over there. Cool.
It's funny. I did so much of that walking in.
Exactly.
Oh, this word looks cool. Oh, it's in the middle of the living room. You must think it's important. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There's so much thinking that we're never going to be able to figure out because it has to do with you, and it has to do with, oh, and I forgot, I have to tell my brother about this thing that I forgot that happened last week, and blah, blah. All these things are running through your head all the time. So point is, we can measure visual cortex, we can measure auditory cortex, but all the rest of it is what's happening in your brain based on your experiences. Yeah.
That would all be like noise in this machine.
Yeah, exactly. We couldn't possibly understand what it is, because let's imagine that I don't know that you have a brother and that something happened to you last week that you need to tell him about. Like, if I don't know that, there's no way for me to establish a correlation in the neuroimaging.
Oh man, yeah, because I'm not giving you the full background with each thought. I'm not going, I have to tell my brother, who by the way is this person, he lives over here and this is what he looks like. That none of that happens in that moment. Oh,
exactly.
Man. So you'd almost have to be able to know all of this person's input that they got through their whole life in order to read their thoughts. And I don't know how you would do that.
Well, okay, you can imagine a scenario 1,000 years from now where people wear, there's so much cameras and things and everything that every moment of your life is tracked.
Sure.
And then in theory, we'd get to be a lot closer, but still you might have thoughts that are remixing things that you've experienced. And I wouldn't know that. If you think, wait, I saw this piece of architecture over here, and then I saw this other thing over here. And what if I put that on a euro bill and it's this thing? Like I wouldn't be able to read that because I've never seen you experience that. You're remixing
imagination,
ideas.
Right?
Yes, it's creativity.
So that wouldn't even be in the input monitor sensors that you have.
Yeah.
Jeez. So yeah, that does not bode well for mind reading technology coming anytime soon.
Exactly. And by the way, people ask me sometimes like, hey, could we do mind reading technology so we could know in an airport as people are walking through if somebody's thinking about bombing a plane?
That's right. Lie detection. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, but something specific like a bomb on an airplane, right?
I see.
But of course, half the people in the airport are thinking about a bomb because they're thinking, I hope there's not a bomb on the plane. And so it doesn't tell you. Yeah. So anyway.
That's true. I go through and I remember the time my idiot friend at the UN was like, hey, I have a bomb. And then they were like, well, now we're going to search all you dumbass kids. Because we know you're joking, but we want to make an example out of you.
Right.
That was, that was fun. But what about lie detection? Is this in the same boat as mind reading? It seems like it would have to be because lies are so complicated.
It is. Right. Lie detection is a very fascinating thing because you can actually measure things in neuroimaging when somebody's doing a lie, because essentially a lie requires two things. One is squelching the truth. Like, let's say I ask you a question. You know what the truth, I say, hey, what's your wife's name? You know what the true answer is, but then you have to squelch that, and then you have to cook up a new version.
Yeah, right.
Okay. And so what happens when you lie is there's a couple of different regions that we can see in the brain. Okay. So when that was discovered about the year 2000, a couple companies started right away to do fMRI lie detection. But they both went out of business, and here's why. It's because it's super easy to fool these things. Because, for example, there's a million ways. Like if I'm in the scanner, I can like move my foot around or do other things or think about some other thing and screw up the whole signal. These are very sensitive signals, and you can't. Yeah. So it turns out lie detection, there's a misunderstanding about lie detection, which is there's no such thing as a lie that you're just reading. Let's say with a traditional lie detector, the polygraph test that they use in courts. You're not measuring a lie. What you're measuring is the stress, the physiological stress that's typically associated with the lie. So if you ask me a question and I'm lying to you, there's certain stress that goes with that, and that's what's being picked up on. But let's say I'm a particularly good liar, or I've practiced this lie a bunch, or I'm a psychopath and I don't care that I'm lying. It doesn't stress me out at all. Then there's not going to be that signal.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm a terrible liar, so I have like all the tells, right? It's like I start touching my face and sweating and like fidgeting with my hair and looking at the floor. And it's funny, we did this game like Two Truths and a Lie a while ago at a dinner. And the women at the table were like, "You're one of the worst liars I've ever seen." They were laughing at me, and they're like, "This is just pathetic. You should never lie about anything."
I believe you, but a good liar would say the same story that you're saying.
I suppose
by the
they
way.
would. I suppose they would. Although they probably wouldn't also then start sweating and looking
No,
at the
they would
floor.
do that purposely
they would.
sometimes. Sure.
Oh man.
I mean, if you're a sophisticated liar, you would set this up so that then people around you think, "Oh, we know when Jordan's lying," so that then you can get away with one.
So I'll let everybody guess as to which one of those is true. Either I'm a great liar or I'm a terrible liar, and you'll find out. With fMRI or whatever lie detection, it seems like the police would need. I'm trying to think just from a legal perspective. Would you need a court order that says you can invade someone's brain with this thing?
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's one of the issues is the sanctity of your inner cosmos. Yeah. So just as an example, there was a case in the 1960s where the police, thought this guy probably had drugs. They broke into his house and he ran upstairs and they chased him after him. And he got to his bedroom and there were these pills on the dresser and he stuck all the pills in his mouth and swallowed them. And then said, "You can't bust me on anything because you can't find anything."
Yeah.
So the police had him taken to the hospital and they pumped his stomach. And this went all the way up to the Supreme Court about whether that's okay to do that or that's an invasion of privacy. And so the Supreme Court ruled that that was an invasion of privacy to pump somebody's stomach, right? But there are other circumstances when you can be given a blood test or something. So anyway, this issue about brain imaging is always right in between. This is an active area in legislation right now about when it counts as private or not. But I think for a while, what we're going to see is that it's a step too far as far as invasion of privacy. Even if we had meaningful fMRI lie detection, the idea of saying we're going to handcuff you and force you in the scanner and force your brain to tell us something, that's not gonna fly.
Yeah. I mean, it depends on the police state we have in 1,000 years when this technology exists.
Exactly right. Typically what we have now, though, is that you can volunteer. You say, "Hey, I would like to take the lie detector test," and present that as evidence. The court doesn't have to accept it.
That's true. Yeah, this is like, it's sort of Minority Report-ish.
Yeah, now the interesting thing about Minority Report, which is important, is that it is a total fantasy to imagine that you could ever predict what somebody is going to do. Why? Right. Because the world's really complicated, and every moment your brain is changing based on what the whole world is doing to you. So we can't ever know, oh, now we've got such great technology, we know that in a week Jordan's going to commit a crime. No possible way of ever knowing that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I think the whole premise of that movie was there was 3 psychic women.
Exactly.
That was beyond ridiculous, but I guess that's how they handled that plot hole by being like, yeah, they have supernatural powers, don't ask too many questions. All right, a quick break. I'm going to tell you about something that'll actually make your life a little bit easier. I regularly take shots of Ketone IQ plus caffeine from HVMN. It is 5 grams of ketones, 100 milligrams of caffeine from green tea. So no sugar, no crash, just clean, focused energy. Now, ketones are molecules that your body naturally produces during fasting, intense exercise, or a low-carb, high-fat diet, so aka ketosis. And when glucose, carbs, aren't readily available, your liver breaks down fat into ketones, which then become an alternative fuel source for your brain and muscles. And our body likes using ketones because they're a high-efficiency fuel, especially for the brain and the muscles. Ketone IQ from HVMN skips that whole process, gives you pure, drinkable ketones, so you get the benefits of ketone energy without having to fast for days on end or go full keto.
I take it before I hit the gym. It gives me that steady, locked-in energy without making me feel like I'm kind of vibrating a little bit. And I also take it before I need to do a show. Same deal. I feel focused, same steady energy. And it's not just me. Team Visma, Lisa Bike, literally the best pro cycling team in the world. They use Ketone IQ to fuel their races. These guys won the Tour de France twice, dominated all 3 Grand Tours last year. Olympians, Ironman champions, they're all on this stuff because it works. So if you want to try it, go to ketone.com/Jordan. You'll get 30% off your first subscription order and a free 6-pack of Ketone IQ. That's these little things right here. Get energy that actually works. Ketone.com/Jordan. Links in the description. If you're thinking about starting a business or you already have one and maybe logo or branding design is not your strong suit, you're going to love Design.com. With Design.com, creating a standout logo is as easy as it gets. You just pop in your business name and your industry, and in seconds, you're going to get thousands of custom logos to choose from. Every design is handcrafted by top designers and exclusive to Design.com, so you're getting something unique. Once you find a design that you like, you can customize the fonts, the colors, the layouts to make it yours. Then you download all those assets and you're good to go. And Design.com doesn't just stop at logos. They've got tools to help you create all of your branding materials, from website to social media posts to business cards, all perfectly aligned with your brand. If you already have a logo, you can upload it and you get instant access to thousands of design templates that actually match your brand's look and your color scheme. So this tool saves you a lot of time. It lets you focus on growing your business instead of getting stuck in the weeds with marketing materials. With a 4.8-star Trustpilot rating, Design.com is legit amazing. It's run by a friend of mine. The company's been around for a while. They really do care about their customers. Try it for free at design.com/Jordan. That's design.com/Jordan.
So the anti-counterfeiting, the reason, why did they tap you for this? What are they looking for?
Yeah. What they wanted to know was, what do people actually perceive when they look at a bill? And what do they not perceive? So what they were doing was spending tons of money on anti-counterfeiting measures, like there's a hologram, and there's color changing ink, and there's a little stripe, and there's little fibers in the bill that change color when you shine a UV light on them, things like this. There's all kinds of stuff. And it turns out no one ever notices this stuff. As in, okay, forget the UV light part. Just looking at the bill, there's about 5 or 6 different security measures. People just don't notice. So what the EU realized is they're wasting tons of money every year on this stuff, and they wanted to figure out what is the way we see the world and what would cause people to look at the bill and get it a little bit better. So I happened to be at a visual neuroscience conference, and I was standing in the back because I usually just stand in the back when I'm listening to things. And there was this other guy standing there. So we start chatting at some point, and he said he's from the European Central Bank. And I said, wow, what are you doing at this little visual neuroscience conference? And he said, well, I'm here to learn some things and figure out how to reduce counterfeiting. So we started chatting for a while, and I popped some ideas, and then that's how they contracted me.
That's pretty cool. It seems shockingly informal for how a government would normally go about anti-counterfeiting. Like, oh, yeah, I met this guy at a conference. We were hanging out in the back, having a couple of pina coladas or whatever, and then I decided to hire him to figure out how to anti-counterfeit these, or stop counterfeiting these euros.
That's right. I mean, I suspect they did some research on me, and they figured out that I was capable of doing this. But yeah, I think it was so brave of them to do this, because to my knowledge, other governments haven't done that before. Instead, they've got their, guys, and they try to figure stuff out about better and better security measures. But that doesn't work. In fact, the European Union had done this thing for a while, where they ran public campaigns about stop, look, feel. I don't know what it was, but it was this thing about, hey, everyone, when you're handed a bill, you should really stop and look at the bill and so on. And it didn't work at all.
Who's going to do that?
Yeah, exactly. Nobody did.
With so $5.
Exactly. Yeah. So they spent $10 million more doing these public service ads on it, and didn't lead to anything. So that's why they were looking for a new strategy there.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because if I got a counterfeit $100 bill, unless it was really bad, I would never notice. Yeah. And then it's also kind of not my problem, because I'm going to go spend that at, I don't know, a gas station or something, and then they're going to put it in the bag, and then the bank is going to go, crap, this is fake. And then I don't know how it works, but I think the business loses that money.
Yeah, that's good.
So,
right.
And if they use the marker and it's a good counterfeit, it's going to work with the marker, or they're going to shine. I mean, I don't think that anybody pays attention to this. So somebody just gets screwed later down the line. That's probably not going to be, it's not going to be the person who's selling flowers at the stand on the side of the road who gets it, right? It's going to be somebody who's going to the bank. So I thought that was kind of, these little tiny like, oh, this dollar has a spider in the corner on top of the 5. No, unless you're little kids look for that, not grown-ass adults who are handling $1,000 an hour in currency.
Well, exactly right. But also, it's really easy to copy that. So what so the ECB, the European Central Bank, hired me to do this. And the very first thing, so I said, okay, are you going to send me some counterfeits? And they said, we can't for legal reasons. So you need to counterfeit yourself. So
what, you need to make your own?
Exactly. And it turns out it's
okay.
So for the kind of studies I was doing, they didn't, the difficulty with counterfeiting, for example, is getting the paper right. The paper is very special. I'll tell you how they do that in some places, like in Venezuela, when the economy was really crashing there. They would bleach the Bolivar bills. They would bleach their bills to make counterfeits for other countries.
I see.
Because it turned out to be economically worthwhile to do that. But yeah, so what I did though is I would, for example, you can take a bill and you can just copy it with a high resolution scanner and print it and so on. It doesn't feel quite right, but the point is it's quite easy to get all the pieces and parts, except for the watermark. Okay, so the watermark is the part where you hold up the bill and you look in the light and you can see a little figure through the thing there. That, it turns out, is the part that's the most difficult to counterfeit because that exists between the front and the back.
That's what I thought, yeah.
Exactly. So you can't print that in any normal way. So typically counterfeit operations have an artist that draws that part. So this led to one of the main recommendations I made to the European Central Bank, which is they had a building, a little structure as their watermark. So you look in the thing, you see the little building. I ran studies showing that I can show you a building and then I can show you another bill that has a similar building and you can't tell the difference.
Yeah.
Unless you're an architect who specializes in that kind of thing or something. Right. You just don't know the difference.
This has Doric columns. This has Ionic columns.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So what I recommend is they put a face there because faces we are super specialized for. We've got all this neural real estate for recognizing faces.
I see.
So you can tell if a face doesn't look right. I mean, imagine you're looking at your wife's face and someone's drawn it. It's not, you would immediately be able to tell. Now, the problem was they thought that was a great suggestion and went for that, but they didn't know whose face to use because in the European Union, you've got all these different countries and everyone wants their own person, their own king.
Who had a large control over a large portion of Europe for any period of time? Nobody that you want to put on the money these days.
Exactly. Exactly.
I meant Napoleon for the record. Yeah.
So what they did finally is they used the face of the mythical goddess Europa,
there you go.
Which is sort of a half step in the right direction because on the one hand, we can get used to it and recognize, hey, that face doesn't look right, but it's not a face we immediately recognize because it's a made up face, first of all.
Right.
So it wasn't the perfect solution, but it got us closer.
So you're mentioning that the looking at buildings is confusing for us, or not confusing, but we don't see the small differences, and that's part of the problem. And that for faces, we have more neural real estate. Do we know why that is?
Yeah.
I got a painting of myself from a sponsor. And my initial reaction was, that doesn't look anything like me. How did they get this so wrong? But everybody else, including my wife, was like, what are you talking about? It looks exactly like you. It's totally fine. And then we shared it with my parents and they're like, oh, it really does. And I was just thinking, are you all insane? This doesn't look like me. So that sort of familiarity with our own face or maybe the faces of others, that we just have a much higher degree of specificity that we can look at.
So there's two issues in there. So one is your ability to recognize other people's faces. This is evolutionarily very important. We're an extremely social species. And so we live in small groups and we look at faces and the identity is massively important to us. And we're so good at it that when you realize that the difference from face to face is like a tiny difference in the distance between the eyes or the length of the nose or the frenulum or the width of these are really subtle differences.
Yeah.
But we are exquisitely good at it because we're a social creature. Now, the issue about why you don't recognize your own face, that's because you only see your face from a particular angle in the mirror. Straight on.
Right, so it's backwards.
And by the way, it's left, right, reversed in the mirror. But also, you don't see yourself from all the other angles.
Oh, it was a side profile, too, yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, that's not what side profile looks like. I was like, you're crazy. It's exactly what your side profile looks like.
Exactly. This is analogous to, for different reasons, but it's analogous to hearing your own voice. You and I, as podcasters, are probably much more used to hearing our voice than other people.
Yeah.
But when you're a kid and you hear your own voice on a tape recorder, you think that doesn't sound anything like me. And that's because you only hear your own voice from inside your head.
Right.
And the resonance of the skull and the cavities in there, it's very different from how other people hear you.
Starting off with podcasting is tough for a lot of people because they always go, I hate the way that I sound. And I always have to tell new podcasters that will eventually fade. And they go, oh, why will my voice change? And I go, no, you're just going to get so used to hearing yourself in a recording. It'll be almost like you're hearing yourself when you talk, but it's going to take a year or two because you need to build up the reps or whatever it is, the hours of hearing your own voice. But yeah, until then, it sounds like the answering machines in the 80s where you go, oh my God, is that what I sound like? This is horrible news.
Exactly. So that's why when you saw your face and stuff.
Yeah.
The other weird part is that, you're constantly changing, right? I mean, your face morphs through time. And you see that when you look at a picture of yourself from a decade ago, 2 decades ago, and so on. But it's hard somehow to keep track of that about ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. So people will notice faces, back to the money, people will notice faces more than buildings. And since that's such a noticeable, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a intuitive, maybe thing that we might notice. Cause no one's like, wait, this doesn't have that little strip on the side that shines when I shine the UV on it. It's not there. Or they mark it with a marker if you pay with 100 at Chuck E. Cheese, right? To make sure they're not getting a counterfeit. They really just need to be able to look at it and go, that face looks a little bit too cartoony.
Yeah.
Maybe this is fake.
Exactly. Now, here's the thing. The reason the watermark is important is because all the rest of it is just super easy to scan digitally and reproduce. So all the rest we just assume will be right. The watermark is the part that has to be done by hand usually. And so that's why that really matters there. What's interesting, I'll tell you one of the other recommendations I made to these guys is I said, look, what I've realized from a year of doing this is that a bill is full of distractions. The thing, the trees, the flowers, the banners, the eagles, the whatever, like it's so full of stuff that you would not notice if that tree were missing or the eagle, like it just doesn't matter. And what that does is it distracts us from the security features. Therefore, the optimal thing to do would be to have a blank bill with a single hologram in the middle. Holograms are hard to counterfeit. And so that's it. You just want a single hologram in the middle that tells you the money, 20 or 50 or 100. And I made the argument to these guys and they all sat there and they said, you know what? In theory, we agree with you. The logic of it is indisputable, but what they felt like is money has to be regal looking, and they felt like there's all this cultural momentum to money. And so in the end, they rejected that. They turned it down, but it's a real shame because that's how you stop counterfeiting or reduce it greatly.
So it would have been like a blank white or off-white colored paper with a hologram in the middle and the number 20 on it.
That's it. That's the whole thing.
Yeah.
That's the right way to do it.
I get the logic. They're like, oh, we hired this guy for the science, and we were kind of hoping the science would look a little nicer at the end of the day.
Exactly.
Be a little bit neater, fit into our bucket more. We were kind of hoping you'd come back with like a really simple design that we could print on the side. Yeah, they were probably regretting that. That makes sense, though. That blank money with a hologram only sounds like future money.
Yeah.
It sounds like something you'd see 100 years from now.
I hope that is where it'll go 100 years from now. And by the way, let me just note, in case any of the listeners are thinking, hey, who even uses cash anymore?
Yeah.
What's interesting is how much it's used around the world. Cash is still king.
Really?
Despite crypto, despite credit cards, all that stuff. Yeah, because most of the world is at, markets and stalls and flea markets and whatever. I mean, there's just tons of that stuff going on. Yeah, even now.
I guess it depends, right? If you probably look at transaction amounts, maybe all that's digital when like one company's wiring $300 million to another one. But if you look at the volume of individual transactions, you're right. It's probably like $2 or whatever. The average is probably globally like $4 or something like that, and usually done in cash in exchange for, I don't know, goat milk or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that, because that totally makes sense. Wow. So it's still the only counterfeit money I've ever had. I went to Cambodia and I was in a non-regular border. I took a boat from Vietnam to Cambodia. And so I was in the middle of the jungle and somebody offered to break money for me. And it was a little kid and I was 20 years old. So I should have thought Like, why would I need this? And he gave me a $5 bill that was so obviously fake. And I could have said something, but I thought, this is kind of a cool souvenir that I got for $5.
Okay.
It's like dark black ink. The paper's definitely just like trash quality Monopoly money paper. And it looks kind of good. And I could almost surely get rid of it and spend it if I wanted to go to prison. But it is like, it's the kind of fake you get in the middle of the jungle in Cambodia.
Oh, God.
Like, and first of all, who's printing $5 bills? Like, that's the low
That's
rent.
odd. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, most counterfeiting is the high,
You would
the
think.
50s and 100s in Europe. By the way, there's one other thing about European money, which I suggested to them, which is European money is different sizes. So the 20, the 50, and the 100.
For blind people, right? Is that the idea?
Exactly right. Although, note that we have blind people in the United States,
Yeah.
too. And
Are they just out of luck, or do they have to have somebody be like, this is a 20, let me fold the corner?
yeah.
How does that work?
I don't know, actually.
All right, blind listeners, tell me how this works.
Yeah, gosh,
Tell
I'm
me how this
embarrassed I don't
works.
know the answer to that. But in Europe, that's why they do it. But that actually, from a counterfeiting point of view, is not that great an idea. And here's why. It's because when you are handed a bill in Europe, you immediately know what it is, which causes people to look at the bill even less.
Oh,
And
sure.
so in
Yeah.
America, we have to at least look at the bill for 200 milliseconds longer to figure out what am I holding, because the size doesn't tell you the answer to that. So I think they should make them all the same size so that you at least look at it a little bit longer. They said, we love the idea, but we'd have to retool all the vending machines in Europe. So that's why they rejected
man.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they can retool them to take Apple Pay. That's my suggestion.
Very good.
The phone pay. I mean, that's only a matter of time anyways.
Yeah,
I suppose. This kind of reminds me of, what is it? There was, I think Darren Brown did this. You know Darren Brown, the illusionist. He's been on the show. One of the things that he or someone else did was he had somebody asking for directions in some place. It was probably at Stanford or something like that. And then he would interrupt them with guys that are carrying a huge painting or drywall, or I forget what it was.
Door.
And then he would switch out the person behind. So you've seen this, right? He'd switch the person out behind it. And it gets to the point of ridiculousness where it's like they change a guy with brown hair that looks a little bit like me to another guy with brown hair that looks a little bit like me. And then it was like, now they're changing it to a guy with no hair. Now they're changing it to an old man. Now they're changing it to a African-American dude. And then it becomes like a guy that looks like me and then like a African-American woman. And the person who's talking just doesn't notice that that's not the same person that asked for directions. We'll link to
Yes.
this in the show notes because it's insane.
Exactly right. And Darren did that experiment, but this was actually an experiment done at Harvard originally
Okay.
with some colleagues of mine who did this. They were very interested in this concept of change blindness, which is how much do we notice changes in the world? Now, the fact is that the world tends to be stable. So I'm talking to you now, Jordan, and if I look somewhere else and then I look back, you're really likely to still be here because that's just how physics works.
Right.
But so they wanted to know, but what does that mean? If I'm assuming that I'm talking to you and then I look somewhere and you turn into somebody else, would I even notice? And so, right, they did this experiment in the Harvard quad with, the door passing in between people. But there are many different versions of this. Just the simplest is, you show a photograph and then the photograph goes away and you show the photograph again. And maybe you swap back and forth between A and B with a little blank space in between each time. And you tell the person there's some massive difference between photo A and photo B. Can you tell me what the difference is? And people are terrible at it. And once they finally do see it, or you tell them the answer, they think, how could I not have seen that? These two pictures are there's like a major difference, like a car disappears from one to the other, or the railing in the background, moves by 3 feet up and down. Or the engine of the airplane is missing or not missing from photo A to B. But we just don't see that. Why? It's because all we ever see is our internal model of the world. So when I look at a photograph, let's say it's a bunch of soldiers lined up to get on an airplane, big Hercules jet. When I'm asked to look at the photograph and see the details there, I think, okay, soldiers, jet, sky, tarmac, and then I'm crawling around the scene with my attentional capacities, and I'm trying to pull in more details to figure out what is the difference between these two photos that look the same to me. Okay, what are the soldiers wearing? What colors are they? How many soldiers are there, and so on. But it takes me a while before I land on, the jet engine that's appearing and disappearing between photos A and B. I just don't notice it. So the thing is, when I look at the photo, this is the important part. I'm not seeing it as though I am a camera of some sort. All I ever see is however rich my model is of it. So all I see is, there's people and plane and sky. And I use, I query, I go out in the world and I ask questions, and that's how you get more and more detail on something. This is the heart of change blindness. This is why we don't notice when there are massive changes. So in the case of the person giving directions to the pedestrian who asks, all you're thinking about is, there's some stranger standing in front of me, and I'm just, trying to do this job of telling them how to get the directions, and I'll never see them again. So your brain just doesn't put that much effort into it.
It's shocking when you see this video, and again, we'll link to it in the show notes. I want people to go check it out and watch it, because you think this either has to be fake or I would never fall for this. These people all need to get a clue or a cup of coffee or whatever. But then I'm dying to know if it would work on me, because I assume that it would. I assume I would also just not pay attention to who that person is.
Oh, yeah, quite right. And I can show you other change blindness examples of things. For example, you can link this on the show notes. There's a British guy named Richard Wiseman who has this great card trick that he does on YouTube. Actually, I'm so sorry. Let me not tell what the punchline is, but I would recommend you link this on the show notes.
Okay.
And what you'll see is he does this card trick, essentially asking you what you notice, and you see the trick and you think, wow, how did I not notice that? But it's extraordinary. It's a terrific video. I'll send you the link. You put it on.
This isn't quite the same thing, but it reminds me of that video where they say, count how many times the basketball is passed back and forth.
Same idea.
Is it the same idea? So we'll, Bob, the show notes guy, is going to have a field day with this one, but we'll link to this in the show notes too. It's count how many times the basketball is passed back and forth, and you're counting the basketball, and then it's like, okay, how many of you noticed the gorilla walking in the background? And you go, there's no gorilla. And then you replay it, and sure enough, there's a guy in a gorilla suit that's just walking in between all the people. And it's impossible. It's ridiculous that you don't notice it. And if you don't tell someone to look at the basketball, all they see is a video of a gorilla walking past.
Yeah.
Because that's what you would obviously notice if you weren't deliberately distracting yourself.
Exactly right. So this is what's classified as inattentional blindness, meaning your attention is on the basketball. You're following the basketball very carefully to see where it's going. And as a result of attending in one spot, you have inattentional blindness to other things in the scene, like the gorilla walking in. Change blindness is essentially a version of that. That has to do with just, you don't know what to look for in the photograph of the airplane, and so you just don't see things.
This must be part of what magicians rely on, right? So they're like talking to somebody in the audience, like, hey, have you ever been to a magic show? And they're like, got a hand behind their back folding something into a paper crane. I don't know.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, magicians have been for centuries very good at this. It's so easy to get the audience's attention to go here and there. They do all kinds of things. Like, they never move their hand in a straight line. They do arcs. They move in a curved arc. And for whatever reason, you just can't resist having your attention follow that.
No, I didn't notice that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, whatever they're doing where they are moving their hand, what they do is they set things up so that you're a little suspicious maybe of what they're doing with their left hand. So you're thinking, I'm a smart audience member. I'm going to keep an eye on the left hand. And while they're doing that, you're watching, they're doing, the right hand is doing whatever they want. And it's total inattentional blindness to the right hand.
That is so interesting and that's what, thousands of years old? I don't know how old magic is. I assume it's thousands of years old.
I assume thousands, yeah.
Because of course somebody sat around trying to think of, they had nothing else to do, right? It's just trying to think of
except for survive.
Right, yeah, except for survive. Yeah, once they were done hunting and gathering, they were probably like, look, it looks like I took his nose off, and he believes me, because mirrors don't exist. Yeah, I know our time has come to. We have so many other topics for the next one, which is great. That means I over-prepared, which I always love. But thanks for having me over to your house. It's a fun little change.
Terrific.
For those not watching on YouTube, we're surrounded completely by human brains in jars that I assume you've taken from other podcasters.
You're exactly right.
Yeah.